Big hello from Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome to another episode of B2B Marketing and More. Yes, we are talking about some of our favorite topics today, B2B marketing. And our focus for today is really about startup and the marketing and sales alignment and how can we optimize it for the startup companies. And I have a special guest, Kayla Graham. She has a title, Operations Manager, but she wears multiple hats and she's responsible for a company called Content Callout, and she does a lot of day-to-day internal operations. At the same time, she's also external facing, and she takes care of her clients, SEO, content marketing outreach, and all sorts of marketing efforts. So we will talk to her a little bit more about this. Welcome, Kayla.
Hey, Pam. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Anytime. So how is weather in Calgary right now?
I'm happy to report that it's not great. Looking a little gray, looking a little snowy, looking a little dismal.
And we'll stay warm, okay? Stay warm.
I will.
You wear multiple hats, and I assume the company is also in the growing stage.
Yes.
And you are not just working for the company Content Callout, which is a growing company. In a way, it's a startup itself. You also work very closely with many of your clients who are SaaS-based platform companies. And you probably have a very specific point of view in terms of when the company was formed or the startup just started. They need to determine, with a limited amount of budget, they need to determine who they should hire. Should they hire a salesperson? Should they hire a marketing person? Or should they kind of get an operation person to set up a process? What is your thought by working with so many companies, startup, that your recommendation in terms of what should they hire first?
Yes, you have hit the nail on the head here of basically the chicken egg situation. And also, as you mentioned, startups don't really have a lot of money.
A lot of budget, yeah.
I think there's kind of two ways to approach this and two ways to answer this. And I'm going to back up the bus here and take it to the beginning, which this might seem obvious. But before you even start with your operations and with your sales team and with your marketing team, are you ready to sell yet?
Awesome. I love that question.
Because first and foremost, and this has happened with a company that I was working with, they went to market, they were ready to go. They had marketing, they had sales, they had operations, they had business. But when it came down to brass tacks, their tech wasn't actually ready and they couldn't deliver on the features that they said that they were doing.
I know that in the startup, they use the term MVP, minimal viable product. You want to make sure that your product is, if nothing else, at MVP that's ready to actually sell. And then your customers, when they purchase that product, they can use it real time in a real environment, not on the developing or production environment, if you will.
100%. And a lot of the times we're working with companies that they have seed funding, but they might not have Series A. And to get to that Series A, they are like trying to get revenue. They're trying to get the product on the market. And sometimes, like, quite frankly, it's just not ready. So assuming that we have all of that in place, everything's ready to go.
Okay.
The next thing that happens is CEOs do everything at first. They're their own admin, they're their own sales team, they're their own ops team, marketing, all of it.
I understand. Because I work for myself, so I completely understand.
Exactly. When it comes down to hire employee number one, I think a lot of times, CEOs are like, well, I need someone in sales. I need to sell. Or they might hire an operations person instead. And I think what it really, really comes down to is, what is your strength as a CEO? So if you're very, very process focused, then you probably actually want to go with sales first. Maybe you're not that good at taking those calls and doing that outreach. I mean, let's be honest, it can be very soul sucking to take meeting after meeting after meeting and just hear the word no over and over and over again, But on the other hand, if you aren't very good at operations and you don't really know how to make process and you don't really have I don't want to say the skill set, but you don't have the strength of being able to see like where your packages exist. What are you actually selling? You might want to hire an operations person first.
Yeah.
I have been in a lot of meetings where this went the opposite way that it was supposed to. And, some companies get pretty far along and they don't even have any internal process or any way to make the packages that they're selling. So I think that's where I stand on that.
So, Kayla, just to paraphrase and make sure that I understand, basically, in the very beginning stage of startup, and your recommendation or advice is to make sure that CEOs look at themselves and have a good understanding in terms of what they are good at, what are their strengths or the areas for improvement. If they are very good at sales, hire someone else that can complement the area they are not very good at. And if they are very good at process, then hire a salesperson that to actually can amplify and sell the product under the assumption that the product is ready to go.
There is another piece of this, which is, when does marketing come in?
I was going to ask you about that. Now, let's assume the product is fantastic. They are growing, not rapidly, but they are growing steadily. So when do you think that startups should look into build the marketing team? And also, should that be insourced or outsourced?
That's actually a tough question because it kind of all depends on where you are. So, is this your first startup? If it is, you might not have a very good personal brand yet. You might not have any thought leadership developed. Maybe no one knows who you are. So if we even look at the marketing funnel, you're in awareness. You're in the awareness phase.
Top of the funnel, which is, you need to build the brand awareness. Yes.
That's right. And, I think a lot of people try to fast forward through that process and you just actually can't. People have to know who you are. And as you're building your company, that is a very interesting marketing story, actually, because it helps you build authenticity in your brand. I mean, especially when we're doing B2B, people don't want to really connect with a machine. They still want to connect with a story.
Yeah, or a person. Yeah,
exactly. And yes, they want a solution that works for them, but ultimately they want to connect with the story behind that and the authenticity. So I think there's a lot of value in, as you're building, even if you're not doing traditional marketing, just documenting your story on LinkedIn and building up thought leadership that way. I think it does a lot, even just, to build the awareness.
Yeah. But, building a brand awareness, brand awareness is such a big word. A lot of times when people think that a brand awareness, they were like, oh, everybody needs to know who I am. For startup, the budget is limited. The pay, part of it doesn't matter if it's pay social or even a pay media effort. Pay is kind of expensive. So I understand that doing a LinkedIn or have the content on your website and then you do a regular organic outreach is important. But without budget, it's very, very hard to build up brand awareness. What is your thought on that?
I completely agree. Without budget, I think everything is hard.
I know. Talk to me. Seriously.
That's why the CEO ends up being the marketer half the time. But, I think it's all about what is the potential that marketing can bring you? If I make a marketing plan, what am I going to achieve from that? What is the best case scenario? What is probable? What can I actually achieve from that? And figuring out when you should start to implement that it's really important. I don't know that it's like necessarily about how much revenue you're making. And I understand that budgeting is tough, but you do have to put some of it aside for marketing. And in the beginning, that means you probably are outsourcing to an agency, which is totally okay. I will say this though, if you don't have someone on your side that is dedicated to reviewing strategy, reviewing the marketing plan, reviewing the content that's coming in, and actually sitting down and approving it and making sure that it, ticks the boxes to hit your ideal customer profile, you're going to be in trouble. So that happens a lot, that you don't actually have anyone on your side directing traffic. And, even if you can just get someone part-time to do it, I think it makes a big difference.
You need to have a plan to direct the traffic or tell people what to do. And I agree with you that in terms of like, if you 100% outsource that, but nobody's taking the lead on the marketing front, or the CEO just taking kind of like, just doing it like a part-time, that's not going to be very successful. And I feel that somebody need to represent the company, and that person can either be part-time or they can be full-time. But having CEO or somebody wears multiple hats, I don't think that will work very well.
At the end of the day, that usually is what happens, at least at first in the beginning. The CEO does have to do a lot of hats. But I
Hats,
think
right?
there's also an issue too, where people don't realize how much time it actually takes to review that content.
Talk to me about that. Oh my God. Do you know how many times I have to talk to my clients, like senior manager of like my client? Oh, that should be done like tomorrow, right? No, that's not true. We have to go through the process. And on top of it, even the image that you use for LinkedIn, they have a different sizes actually for Twitter and also for Facebook. And also you need to write a copy a little bit differently and for different channels. I do agree it takes quite a bit of time to actually get that done. And a lot of time managers, senior managers or salespeople, they don't really understand how time consuming the marketing, especially digital marketing, nowadays the modern marketing, how time consuming these texts are.
It's so time consuming.
It's ridiculous.
I always make this joke, that people like to wave a magic wand, the marketing magic wand, and everything is just done. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. Like we don't write a blog post and then all of a sudden you're on page 1 of Google.
It's a long play. It's a long play.
Absolutely. And even if the CEO says, okay, I'm going to review the content. Okay, great. You're reading it, but are you tying it back to your customer profiles to make sure that the message makes sense? Are you thinking about your audience and what you know about them? Are you making sure it's ticking the boxes of, the information that you're trying to give your audience? What is the point of this content that you're making?
It's a full-time job all by itself.
On top of that too, okay, so you found the best ghostwriter in the world. Congratulations. That is already very, very hard to do.
I try so many writers and I tend to write stuff myself, but from time to time, I actually have someone else. I will write a draft and someone else edit, or she can create the first draft and I will take over. It doesn't matter. But it's very, very hard to find like a person that really know your style. And yet
That's right.
it's cost effective. It cannot be too expensive.
Make sure that you're not going to get back something that's useless. That means you have to do a lot of work on the front end, providing a brief for that writer. Even if they are the best ghostwriter in the world, you still have to do that.
You absolutely have to brief them. Briefing is so important.
And if you don't have a dedicated marketing person on your team to even handle doing those briefs, it can become just so cumbersome when you get the piece.
Because if you don't do that prep work in advance, honestly, in a way, you are not giving your agency or contractor direction, right? So they can take any direction they want. And then, of course, when they present the information to you and you're like, what? This is not what I want. But you did not give them a specific direction. You need to provide that direction first.
You hit the nail on the head there. And this is what we're talking about when you get into revision D7, D8, draft number 9, draft number 10. And, it ends up being just way more of a time suck for everyone.
Yeah.
It's not a situation anyone wants to be in. You don't want to be in that situation as the writer because you can't make profit. And also you just get that like imposter syndrome feeling of like, oh my God, do they hate everything I've done? You don't want to be in that situation as like a project manager or, the person who's directing traffic. It's not a good situation for anyone. So yes, you have to provide those directions and it becomes really challenging if you're the CEO trying to do everything yourself. Having that one dedicated person, it helps.
Yeah, I 100% agree. So now we have a dedicated person, marketing a person that actually work with agencies and contractor and actually create a plan. So what are the tools that the marketing and sales must to have to make sure that the whole thing is running smoothly?
Anything that automates processes that are typically manual and horrible to do, number 1 in my book is an amazing tool. So to give you an example, you always need a project management tool of some kind. Does your project management tool integrate with any of the other tools that you're using? So just for me, from a user perspective, my team does a lot of our talking internally on Slack because we're a remote team, as many teams are these days. And things come up in those discussions that end up being tasks, and then they just get lost in this sea of nothingness. But what I love about it is that there's a tool right inside of Slack that can make that a task right in our project management software. Boom, it goes in, it doesn't get lost. Now, if we're talking about marketing and sales talking to each other, having a good CRM and a good CRM process is super, super important. So to me, I mean, I will die on this hill. I think that HubSpot is the best one. And there's always more integrations coming with it. Even their SEO tools are like starting to knock it out of the park and compete with WordPress really well. So I mean, I'm very pro HubSpot.
Really? So the thing about HubSpot, I have several friends that actually use HubSpot to build their website. The loading speed is way too slow. It takes forever to load. I'm not necessarily in agreement with that. Sorry.
Well, and that's totally fair because the other disadvantage too about them is that they only have a few templates. So they're not yet at the customization level that, say, WordPress is at. But I do think like it's going to start to come, and we might see that in the next few years. Now, if we're talking just marketing and sales being able to have visibility into what each other are doing, I think the HubSpot CRM tool works really, really well for that. There has to be a communication between sales and marketing. And, I think this is just like an age-old battle where sales and marketing don't get along.
I think it's not like they don't get along. A lot of time it's just a matter of they have different goals or they approach things a little bit differently. Or when I say they have different goals, that means, oh my God, company has the revenue goal and then marketing trying to do something else and sales trying to do something else. I think the overall business goals stay the same. But once that's translated down to a different organization, it tends to be a different stuff. For example, HR is not going to focus on the revenue goal, but HR is going to focus on hiring. Does that make sense? And then in the marketing, maybe they are focused on lead gen or they focus on the brand awareness. But the sales side, they tend to focus on the middle of the funnel, the purchase funnel, or the bottom of the purchase funnel. So it's the focus tend to be different, but they still trying to achieve the same business objectives. Does that make sense? So it's just the way they approach things or the things that they will do, they want to accomplish at that time, at the same time, they are not necessarily aligned. They are still working toward the same goal.
I'm with you on this. And the way I like to look at it is like swimming in a pool. We're all swimming towards the end of the pool, but we all have a lane. We all have a lane that we're swimming in, right?
I do agree with you in terms of the sales and marketing alignment is actually hard. It's much harder what I have seen because I work with the global enterprises and many of my clients are big enterprises. And because they are so big, so having the challenge to align the sales and marketing tend to be much harder because both sides have a very big organization. Does that make sense? They have very big, they all have a very big organizations. Therefore, it's very, very hard to align from time to time. Or the alignment needs to be driven from the top. But I always get a sense, and by talking to several startups that I'm close to, the sales and marketing tend to be very close. Like I was talking to several companies, they also sell SaaS-based platform because the company is pretty small and the marketing only 2 people and the sales is about 10 and they talk to each other all the time. Is that the case, what you see in reality as well?
Well, yes, but also no. Like we said, everybody is swimming towards the end of the pool, towards the same goal. So yeah, they want to sell and create revenue. That's what everybody's trying to do. I think that marketing, especially in a small company though, they are split up over so many tasks that it becomes hard to give support to their own internal sales team when a lot of their efforts are focused on external factors. The second part of that where I see like animosity happening is, okay, so sales is going to act on the leads that are generated by marketing. They're going to take the MQLs, right?
And they will say it's not high quality.
Exactly. It's not high quality or, this lead is not warm enough. So there's something going on in the process internally that things aren't as far along as they should be before it's passed off to the sales team. And that often has to do with KPIs and metrics, especially in a startup. You're trying to cover carve out your own piece of the pie, which is, what's my bonus structure going to look like this year? And how much budget is my team going to get? And to do that, you have to, hit your OKRs, hit your KPIs. And that could be X amount of leads. So, someone signs a form and, to view a white paper. Is that really a lead? Well,
No.
right? And sometimes those are getting passed on and they're not high quality when they come to sales. And that creates a problem in the process and a problem for sales. So, I have to be honest, I haven't actually seen yet a really, really good example of this working super, super well. And I'm sure that within time it will. And I'd be really interesting to get your perspective on how that works in the big companies, because I imagine the bureaucracy and red tape around, even just making decisions can be super, super hindering.
It's very hard to actually align between sales and marketing in big organizations. The reason is, for example, if you're talking about a global enterprise and on the sales side, and they focus on multiple different verticals, because they are such a big companies, they probably sell the solution to healthcare, the financial institution, manufacturing, government, etc. On top of it, they also have different accounts, right? And the accounts usually have a different levels. You have this global and national account, you have the mid-size accounts, and then you have like SMB, the small business accounts. So the different tiers of accounts and also require different kind of support. So you can see that the industries and also the different sizes of accounts already two different variables. Sales tend to be the organization probably structured either by industry or by regions, right? So, hey, you manage the East Coast, I manage the West Coast, and somebody manage the central region of the US. So that's another variable. So in terms of supporting sales, there are so many variables that the marketing team has to take into account. And also, if you want to create content, should the content be by a different industries, or should that be by different regions for that matter? So there's layers and layers of a complexity, I think, in the bigger organization in terms of what marketing can do to support sales. On top of it, you mentioned another thing, which is the processes and also the MarTech stack also need to build up to actually support that, right? If you really want to track the MQL, from MQL move from marketing automation, MQL move into kind of like CRM, that process needs to be very smooth. And at the same time, when that's transferred onto the sales side, what sales do with that specific MQL also needs to be tracked. That requires sales enter information into the system. And a lot of time, guess what?
You're not going to get that.
Sales are not interested actually entering a lot of
entry's
information.
not going to happen.
There's just a lot of things that's kind of like going on like in parallel. When I try to work with marketing team actually supporting sales, I always tell them to take baby steps, especially in the bigger organization. There are so many issues needs to be addressed. So what are one or two issues that we can address now? And identify some of low-hanging fruit
for sure
that you can take care of it in a short period of time. And there is obviously the long-term collaboration or process or even the data integration that needs to happen in the back end. That usually requires several quarters of a planning, sometimes even a year. So that kind of stuff, it requires a whole lot more work. But they are, from my perspective, low-hanging fruit, and also, something that's require much broader initiative or investment to get it done. And you have to look at from, kind of like a two different perspective, if you will.
I'm glad you brought up the baby steps, because I think this is something that's really important, even just in startups when sales and marketing are working together. And it goes even into, content planning and strategy as well. Startups, and still, I think big businesses too, and I know this is a gross word and we've heard enough of it in 2021, but agility is key. And we have learned that. And if we have this big plan with not a lot of flexibility in it, whether it's the sales side or the marketing side, and things change, well, then you're in trouble. So there's a certain level of agility that needs to be built into that for quick change. And like you said, it can be so difficult to do that when you're planning, 3 quarters in advance, a year in
I do
advance. It's
agree.
like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, like how are we going to change this now? It's COVID. It's the Suez Canal. It's this, it's that. Like,
But I do agree with you that replanning is very, very critical. And I usually suggest my client to do it like every single quarter.
I agree with doing that. However, with how fast startups seem to change direction, I find that there is like almost more value in being disciplined to do it every single quarter. And if you don't do it for the year, then guess what? You have to do it every single quarter.
That is true. That is true. What are some of the challenges that company tend to encounter, especially they are growing very fast or they are not growing at all? Right? Startup is always have a lot of challenges. They have growing pain or they were like, oh, we are not growing. So what are some of the common challenges that you have found dealing with your customers? What would be your recommendation in terms of how to address these challenges? If you can name one or two, that would be great.
Yeah, so quick growth is always it's
It's a
it's
good problem to have.
it's a good problem to have, but it does create a lot of really sticky internal problems. And one of the things you brought up earlier was the MarTech stack. And it creates problems with the MarTech stack because a tool that you had earlier might not be any good down the road. And then you get a new marketing manager, a new CMO, and they roll out a new tool, and now you actually have a tailspin problem as well because you're paying for a bunch of tools that you're not even using. Nobody knows what processes to use, nobody knows what tools to use. It's fragmented. All of your information is siloed and living in different places. And yeah, that's pretty much a nightmare and a common one. And when I think about common problems, that is like one of the biggest ones. On the other side, if you're not growing, I mean, I think the problem's pretty obvious. I mean, you're losing talented team members because they can feel the death in the air. They're looking for other jobs.
Do you think most of the time not growing, do you attribute that to products?
So the other thing that I notice a lot in high growth startups is there's a lot of competition. So I work with a lot of clients that specialize in supply chain and procurement, different SaaS solutions for that. And the competition is
Fierce.
crazy.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fierce. Yeah.
It seems like every week there's a new solution. So it's like, how fast is your tech evolving? How much are you investing in that? Do you have your eyes on what the competition is doing? Because there starts to be a lot of feature overlap. Can your tech integrate? Like, do your APIs integrate? And then it becomes up to marketing to get that message out there, get it to the world and get it to the customers.
If your product it just happened to hit the core at the right place at the right time, it can take off. But that doesn't mean that you will enjoy that longevities of the profitability. No, a lot of time, a year and two later, there's another players that come into play and can do so much better than you. And all of a sudden, in 2 years or 3 years, your product just obsolete.
Really good example of that, I think. And sorry if I'm calling anyone out here, but when I looked at what happened with the pandemic, when all these teams started working at home and Zoom became really, really popular, well, a few years ago, before Zoom, I didn't even know what it was. We always used GoToMeeting at my offices, and that seemed to kind of like disappear and go extinct. And I think that's a very perfect example of that. Someone who was competitive, was ready for it when everyone was working at home.
Another good example, I think, is Evernote. Like, oh, 5 or 6 years ago, everybody
Mhm.
has Evernote. And then Google kind of built the notes functionality into their platform. And the Apple does the same thing too. Some of the Office suite or even the CIM tool, they all build that notes functionalities into their platform and their software. And then slowly, Evernote becomes irrelevant. I still use Evernote. I still have my annual membership fee and I pay. But the thing is, you don't hear much about Evernote anymore. But it was a very hot startup for a long time. And then, like I said, the competition is fierce in the SaaS-based platform space.
It really is. And I mean, trying to keep that momentum up of when you're hot, that's a really hard job
I
to
think so
do.
too. I 100% agree with you. And you constantly have to add new features. You
That's
constantly have
right.
to invest into your product.
It goes back to what we said too at the start of the call.
I don't care what people say how glamorous startup is. No, it's a sweatshop. I mean, it's like it's a daily grind. It's absolutely a daily grind. Yeah.
It absolutely is. And, I think that plays into this dialogue that we've been given about the hustle culture and how this is kind of like glamorized now even to
Yeah.
do this. How
Yeah.
hard can you work?
So I would like to summarize a lot of insights that you share with us. Number one is very much that if for your first hire of your startup, it depends on the CEO's strength and also weaknesses. And if you know what you are good at, hire somebody to complement you. If you are growing, somehow you will know when you need to hire a marketing team. But to hire a marketing team is nice to actually hire one person that dedicated specifically for the marketing function, and that person can put a plan together, can also be a conduit between the agency and also the CEO or the senior management. And this person can also review a lot of content or the copies or anything created by agencies and contractor. Third things that you mentioned is trying to find tools that will automate your processes, and but at the same time the tool needs to be integrated into the existing tools that you use. And another must-have tool is CRM. You need to actually have the CRM. Is really a customer relationship database. You need to track your customers' data insights and information. And then not just the salespeople should use that, the marketing people should also be very much aware, and also you be a proficient and user of the CRM as well.
100%.
And in terms of a sales and marketing alignment, I guess, you and I talk about how challenges that needs to be. I personally think that needs to be kind of top-down driven. If the CMO or the VP of marketing and VP of sales are very closely aligned, that kind of message will permeate down to the, worker bee level. And if they are aligned, then I personally think people will align as well. But if they are doing their things separately, you know what, then the teams will just be siloed. So I feel that needs to be top-down driven to some extent. Yeah.
Very good.
I'm so happy that you come to my show and share your insight. I would like to ask you one question. What is one place that you always want to go and have never been to?
Oh, there's so many places. So to put it in perspective for you, I didn't even leave Canada until I was 20. So I have a lot of traveling to do. On the bucket list is definitely Tokyo,
Oh, I love Tokyo. I love Japan. Yeah.
Paris, and I also want to go to Colombia. So trying to hit a few
Oh,
continents here.
really? Okay, that's very good. Okay, thank you so much, Kayla, for joining me. And so happy to have you on my show.
This was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a wrap. Take care.
Okay,
Bye
bye.
bye.
Never miss an episode of B2B Marketing and More by following us here on YouTube and leave a comment while you're at it. You can also find episodes wherever you get your podcasts.